So this next sequence is actually really important because this gives Mass's character legitimacy, that he's an expert in his field, which is winemaking. It's actually sparkling winemaking. It's also about introducing characters, and it's really important how you introduce characters without boring the hell out of your audience, right? So I just introduced, for example, Mass's wife in the last sequence and his kids chasing the running ducks, and then I had to get rid of them, of course, so he could meet this next person, who I'm about to tell you about right now, and also show that he's an expert at what he does with the sparkling wine as a hobby. But to do that, I had to get rid of his wife and kids. So they went off to grandma's, and now he's alone in his makeshift laboratory, which is his garage, which he's transformed into a winemaking or sparkling winemaking lab. So he's got all sorts of stuff in there, like beakers and tubes and gosh knows what, along with some, basic fun garage doodad stuff. I think I have a unicycle hanging from the ceiling and maybe a windsurfer or something. And certainly a lot of Star Wars posters, like vintage ones, like the original with R2-D2 and Princess Leia, etc., as well as a few of their figurines, just to show that he is really a geek. He's a Star Wars geek, he's a wine geek. He's into what he does. He gets focused on this particular hobby, sparkling winemaking. He's trying to conquer it. And so we open the sequence with him actually disgorging some of these champagne bottles. Disgorging is basically, my understanding, again, I'm no expert in this, but when you make champagne after the secondary fermentation, which takes a while, there's some like dead yeast at the top of the bottle, and you have this kind of temporary cork or cap, and when you take it off, it disgorges, it blows out, and the dead yeast, which flies out like a bullet, it goes, I don't know, 20 meters. Maybe I'm making it up, maybe exaggerating rather, but it's a pretty loud noise apparently. And it's actually, I know it is actually it can be pretty dangerous if you get in the way of this flying yeast. So the sequence opens again with him in this makeshift, wine making laboratory. And the way I've envisioned it was it's an open garage, like the garage door is open. And again, this whole sequence I made up. So this whole story, the entire story is based on truth, but some of the stuff I have to make up just to get us there, right? So for example, the last sequence, I definitely made that up with the minivan and the two kids and the wife going off to grandma's. That didn't happen in reality. In reality, Mass did start his now well-known, rather famous winemaking or sparkling fruit winemaking operation in that little garage. Never been there, got to go visit him actually, but my vision of it and the way he sort of described it is it's sort of rural like this, out in the farm country and maybe a little apple orchard out back. And he had a neighbor that was annoying. He did tell me that. Other than that, I made all this up. So the Star Wars stuff, what it looks like, I passed it by him to make sure it looked correct, of course, but the bottom line is it's a little wine lab, and he's in this laboratory and he's disgorging his champagne. So it's going boom, boom, boom. And suddenly he hears this screaming, or we hear someone yelling and running down the driveway. And it's his neighbor, this annoying kind of heavy set, balding guy named Ludwig. And he's waving his poodle. He's carrying a little miniature like white poodle. And he's running down the road with his dog. And he's saying, stop, stop, stop. And Mass is like, oh my God, not again. So again, in screenwriting, storytelling, filmmaking, it's really important that there's a backstory. That means your characters had a full life up until that point. And to make that stuff happen and feel real, you got to have instances like this where he's like, oh, not again, even if he doesn't say not again, but it's obviously not the first time this has happened because he's had a life, even if it's fictional, before this. So Ludwig comes running down, yelling at him again, and Mass is prepared. And so when he gets there, they have sort of a verbal quarrel. But Ludwig is like, you can't keep shooting off those damn champagne bottles. It scares the hell out of my little poodle, Snowflake. And I named the dog Snowflake purposely just because it always annoyed me, especially when I was a teenager, when people would name their animals after like inanimate objects. And I always thought, people names are much cooler, call them Wendy or Bert or something, don't call them Snowflake or Rock. Anyway, the Ludwig is screaming about his little white poodle who has apparently piddled on the rug again, his brand new carpet. And he's had to send out, the carpet for cleaning again. And he's threatening to bring the bill again to Mass. And Mass is just like, oh my God. And as Ludwig continues to rant at him, and Mass is holding these champagne bottles, which he's about to disgorge again, he tells Ludwig an interesting fun fact, which is true. I looked this one up. And that is, he says, do you know that the average velocity of a champagne cork is over 100 miles per hour? In fact, it could take out an eyeball. And he's sort of like pointing it at Ludwig, who's still ranting about the dog peeing on his rug and how much money it's going to cost him in cleaning. And Mass continues. And he says, do you also know that more people die every year getting hit by champagne corks than getting bit by poisonous spiders? And Ludwig's, huh? And he says this as he's pointing it at Ludwig, the champagne bottle. And he goes, it's the perfect crime. And Ludwig suddenly realizes it, and he goes, and he starts to run off. And he's doing the zigzag as he runs off, as Mass literally takes these corks these bottles, and begins disgorging them. The first one he goes, and so literally zoom, just misses hitting Ludwig, who's fleeing going that way, and then he grabs another bottle because he's got one of these A-frame like wine holders that winemakers have, with a bunch of bottles in it, and he just keeps taking them out and disgorging them, and then finally you hear actually Snowflake yelp because Snowflake gets hit by one of the yeast balls as it shoots off in the distance. But that little sequence was important because it actually introduces him as an expert. We actually probably don't even meet Ludwig, or maybe one more time, but he's not an important character, but it's really just so he can explain what he's doing to us. So it's a way of covering information exposition, it's called, with action. It's basic storytelling, but I wanted to have fun with it, and I thought this would be fun. So again, the only reality it's based on is that, Mass began his career in the sparkling wine industry in his garage. All the rest I just fabricated, but it's to get us there. It's efficiency in storytelling. Hope that clarifies it for you.